You know what's crazy? Right now, as you're watching this video, Chris Watts is sitting in a prison cell in Wisconsin. And he just received a message. Not from a family member. Not from a journalist. Not from some random person on the internet who's obsessed with true crime. This message came from one of the most feared prison organizations in America, the Aryan Brotherhood. December 15th. A guard at Dodge Correctional Institution is doing his regular mail check. He's looking through letters, packages, the usual stuff. Then he sees something that makes him stop. A letter addressed to inmate number 17B529, Chris Watts. But here's the thing. The return address. It doesn't exist. At least not officially. But the guard knows what he's looking at, because drawn in the corner of that envelope is a symbol. A simple symbol that every correctional officer in America recognizes. 3 leaves. A shamrock. That's the mark of the Aryan Brotherhood. And when they make contact with someone, it's never random. They always want something. The question is, what could they possibly want from Chris Watts? Now, before I tell you what was in that letter, you need to understand something. Something the media hasn't really talked about. Because Chris Watts, the man who took his family away from this world back in 2018, has become something completely different behind bars. Something that caught the attention of one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the prison system. And what I'm about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew about where this story was headed. But first, we need to go back. Back to August 2018. To the moment Chris Watts first walked through those prison doors. Because there's a secret that's been hidden for over 6 years. And it starts with his first 3 days inside. Dear God, as we remember Shannon, her 2 kids, and her unborn baby Nico, may their souls rest in peace. Lord, protect our families from every evil. Please type Amen in the comment. Let me know how much we remember them. And families, please take a moment and tell us where you are watching from. August 21st. It's 3:47 in the morning. Most of the world is asleep. But at a maximum security prison, a van is pulling up to the intake area. Inside that van is Chris Watts. You might be wondering, why do they arrive at night? Why not during the day? The answer is simple. Protection. See, when someone like Chris Watts enters the prison system, everyone already knows who he is. Everyone knows what he did. And in prison, people who hurt women and children, they're at the bottom of the hierarchy. Actually, they're below the bottom. So they bring him in at night, when most inmates are locked in their cells, asleep. It's safer that way. But safer doesn't mean safe. The intake process takes hours. They photograph him. They fingerprint him. They ask him hundreds of questions. Medical history, mental health, gang affiliations, enemies, threats, and then comes the big decision. Where do they put him? In prison, there are different classifications. General population. That's where most inmates live. They eat together, they work together, they have some freedom to move around. But Chris Watts? He can't go to general population. Why? Because within 6 hours of arriving at that first facility, Chris Watts received his first threat. Actually, not his first. His first 47 threats. 47. Think about that for a second. In less than 6 hours, 47 different inmates found ways to send him messages. Some through other inmates. Some through guards who sympathized with them. Some just shouted across the halls. All of them said the same thing. If Chris Watts ever left protective custody, he wouldn't last a day. But here's what the media never reported. One of those threats was different. It came at 2 a.m. Chris Watts was in his temporary holding cell, probably not sleeping. How could anyone sleep in that situation? Then he hears something. A piece of paper sliding under his cell door. He picks it up. 3 words are written on it. We know everything. That's all it said. 3 words. But it wasn't the words that made Chris Watts' blood run cold. It was the symbol drawn at the bottom of that paper. A shamrock. 3 leaves. Now, if you don't know anything about prison politics, that symbol might not mean much to you. But if you're an inmate or a guard or anyone who spent time in the system, you know exactly what it means. That's the mark of the Aryan Brotherhood. And they don't make contact with someone unless they want something. So here's what I need you to understand. From day one, from hour 6, the Brotherhood has been watching Chris Watts. But why? What could they possibly want from him? To answer that, we need to talk about what happened next, about where they put him, and about how Chris Watts spent his time over the next 6 years. Because he didn't just sit in his cell feeling sorry for himself. He was learning, studying, becoming something nobody expected. And that's exactly what got their attention. Let me ask you something. What do you think protective custody means? Most people hear that term and they think, okay, that sounds safe. That sounds like the person is being protected. And technically, that's true. Chris Watts is being protected from other inmates who want to hurt him. But here's what protective custody really means. 23 hours a day in a cell. Let me say that again. 23 hours. Every single day. The cell is tiny. We're talking about 8 feet by 10 feet. That's smaller than most people's bathrooms. In that space, there's a bed, a toilet, a sink, and basically nothing else. 1 hour a day, he gets recreation time. But he's alone. He doesn't get to interact with other inmates. He doesn't get to play basketball or lift weights or do any of the things you see in movies about prison. He walks in a small yard, by himself, with guards watching. Then he goes back to his cell, every single day, for the rest of his life. Now imagine that. Imagine spending 23 hours a day in a room the size of a parking space, with nothing to do, no one to talk to, just you and your thoughts. For most people, that would break them. Psychologically, it's one of the hardest things a human being can endure. There are studies about this. Prolonged isolation does things to the brain. It causes depression, anxiety, hallucinations. Some people lose their grip on reality. But Chris Watts? He adapted. And that's where this story takes a really disturbing turn. June 2019, less than a year after Chris Watts entered the prison system, a prison education counselor files a report. It's not a standard report. It's flagged as unusual. Why? Because Chris Watts has been requesting law books. Now, inmates requesting books isn't that weird. Lots of people in prison try to educate themselves. They read, they study, they work on improving themselves. But Chris Watts wasn't just requesting a few books. He was requesting specific books about criminal procedure, constitutional law, prison litigation, how the legal system works. And he wasn't just reading them. He was studying them, taking notes, really diving deep into the material. Within 8 months, Chris Watts filed 14 different grievances against the prison system. 14. He was challenging his conditions, his treatment, his classification. He was arguing that certain policies violated his rights. He was using legal language, citing cases, making actual legal arguments. Now here's the thing. 13 of those grievances were dismissed. The courts and the prison system looked at them and said, no, these don't have merit. But one of them went through. One of them actually worked. Chris Watts won a small victory, a minor change to his conditions. Nothing huge, but he won. And in prison, that matters. Because it proved something. It proved that Chris Watts wasn't just some guy sitting in his cell feeling helpless. He was smart. He could navigate the system. He could find weaknesses in the legal process and exploit them. And when you can do that in prison, you become valuable. Very valuable. Let me explain something to you. In maximum security prisons, there's an economy. But it's not like the economy you and I know. It's not about money, really. I mean, money matters, but it's about something else. It's about currency. And the currency in prison is information, protection, and power. Some inmates have drugs. That's currency. Some inmates have connections on the outside. That's currency. Some inmates have muscle. They can hurt people. That's currency too. But there's another type of currency that most people don't think about. Legal knowledge. See, there are thousands of inmates who are trying to appeal their cases, challenge their sentences, fight for better conditions. But most of them don't know how to do it. They don't understand the legal system. They can't write a proper motion or brief, so they need help. And if you can provide that help, you become valuable. By 2020, Chris Watts was doing something that shocked prison officials. He was helping other inmates with their legal cases, writing motions, finding loopholes, studying their case files and identifying errors. And he was good at it. Really good. 3 inmates that Chris Watts helped got sentencing reductions. Not huge reductions, but enough to matter. Enough to get noticed. 2 other inmates won appeals for better conditions. Better cells, better food, more recreation time. December 15th. We're back where this whole thing started. The letter. A guard is doing routine mail screening. Every piece of mail that comes into a prison gets checked. They're looking for contraband, for gang communications, for anything that violates prison rules. This letter immediately gets flagged. Why? Because of that symbol. That 3-leaf shamrock drawn in the corner. The guard doesn't even open it. He takes it straight to the warden's office. This is protocol. Any suspected gang communication goes to the top. Now, I can't show you what's actually in that letter. It's evidence in an ongoing investigation. Prison officials aren't releasing it to the public, but I can tell you what sources say it contains. And honestly, it's not what anyone expected. The letter doesn't threaten Chris Watts. There's no violence implied. There's no demand for anything. Instead, it makes an offer. Protection. Full protection inside Dodge Correctional and any other facility Chris Watts might be transferred to. No more protective custody. No more 23 hours a day in a tiny cell. Access to general population. Better conditions. Better food. More phone privileges. More visitation. Everything an inmate could possibly want. But there's always a price, right? The Brotherhood wants Chris Watts to become their legal consultant. Officially, they want him to review cases for their members. Write motions. File appeals. Find legal loopholes that could get people reduced sentences, overturn convictions, better conditions. They want him to be their lawyer. From inside prison. Now, let me explain why this is such a dangerous position for Chris Watts. If he accepts this offer, he immediately becomes a target. The Aryan Brotherhood has enemies. Lots of enemies. There's the Mexican Mafia, the Black Guerrilla family, other organizations that compete for power in the prison system. And they don't like it when someone helps the Brotherhood. If Chris Watts starts working for the Brotherhood, his life expectancy drops dramatically. We're talking months, maybe weeks, before someone from a rival organization tries to hurt him. But here's the other side of that coin. If he refuses the offer, the Brotherhood doesn't just say, "Okay, no problem, thanks anyway." They don't work like that. When the Brotherhood makes someone an offer and that person says no, there are consequences. Bad consequences. Inmates who turn down recruitment offers typically face one of 2 outcomes. Either they get severely hurt, or they don't survive at all. There's no neutral position here. The moment that letter was sent, Chris Watts stopped being just another inmate serving his sentence. He became a piece on a chessboard, and he has to choose which side he's on. But here's where this gets even more complicated. Because there's something the Brotherhood might not know about. Or maybe they do know, and that's exactly why they chose this specific moment to send their letter. Chris Watts has been receiving other offers. From law firms. Real, legitimate law firms on the outside. These firms specialize in criminal defense, in wrongful convictions, and finding legal errors that can help people get their sentences reduced or their convictions overturned. And they want to hire Chris Watts as a paralegal consultant. From prison. This is actually a thing. Prisons have work programs where inmates can do legitimate work for outside organizations. It's legal. It's monitored. And it gives inmates purpose, skills, something to do besides sit in a cell all day. One of these law firms has reached out to Chris Watts 3 times in the past year. They want his help reviewing case files, looking for legal errors, identifying problems that their attorneys might have missed. It's legitimate work. It's legal work. It could give Chris Watts meaning, maybe even a path to something resembling redemption. And 3 days before the Brotherhood's letter arrived in the prison, Chris Watts told his attorney he was seriously considering accepting one of these offers. 3 days. So the timing of the Brotherhood's letter isn't random. It's not coincidence. They knew. They always know. Someone inside the prison, or someone with connections to the prison, told him that Chris Watts was about to take a legitimate job, about to establish himself in a way that doesn't involve them. And they couldn't let that happen. So they sent their letter, their offer, their way of saying you're either with us or you're against us. Chris Watts now faces an impossible choice. Accept the Brotherhood's protection and become a criminal forever. Help one of the most dangerous organizations in America and spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder for rival gangs. Or refuse the offer and hope that a legitimate opportunity saves him before the Brotherhood makes him pay for his rejection. But there's a third option, one that almost nobody is talking about. And it might be the most dangerous option of all. What if Chris Watts doesn't choose either side? What if there's someone else who wants him to make a very different choice? Here's what most people don't realize. Chris Watts isn't just dealing with the Brotherhood. He's not just weighing options between a prison gang and a legitimate job. There are other players in this situation. Players that operate way above the level of prison politics. I'm talking about the federal government. January 2024. That's 10 months before the Brotherhood sent their letter to Chris Watts. The FBI opens an investigation, specifically the Domestic Terrorism Task Force. Now, you might be wondering, what does domestic terrorism have to do with prison gangs? Everything, actually. See, organizations like the Aryan Brotherhood aren't just prison gangs anymore. They've evolved. They have networks on the outside. They're involved in organized crime, in drug trafficking, in violence that extends beyond prison walls. And in recent years, there's been growing concern about prison radicalization, about how these organizations recruit members, spread their ideology, and coordinate criminal activity between prisons and the outside world. The FBI wants to understand these networks better. They want to dismantle them. And to do that, they need information. They need someone on the inside who can tell them how these organizations operate. In his 6 years in prison, Chris Watts has been keeping notes, detailed notes, about threats he's received, about gang activity he's witnessed, about conversations he's overheard, about the structure and operation of various organizations inside the prison. Originally, he kept these notes for his own protection. Legal protection. If something happened to him, if he got hurt, he wanted documentation that he'd been threatened, that he'd reported it, that prison officials knew about the danger. But federal investigators believe those notes could be incredibly valuable. They think Chris Watts' documentation could help them bring down multiple gang networks. Not just the Aryan Brotherhood, but other organizations too. March 2024. Chris Watts is pulled from his cell. No warning. No explanation. He's taken to an administrative office. And sitting there waiting for him are two people he's never seen before. They're not prison officials. They're wearing suits. They have badges. Federal agents. And they have a proposal for Chris Watts.